I can get Richie to buy into it.
There you go.
I'm sorry.
It's yesterday, man.
Yeah, that was ours.
Are we on the, are y'all on the record already? Okay.
Do y'all have any people missing today? Or?
Us, yeah, we have,
Steve?
missing, but he's an alternate, I think. I have to look back at my designations, but I
Yeah.
think all the main members of my team are here today.
Okay.
We're missing Richie can tell.
Richie's not here?
Oh, you got it. Oh, there's on the other side. Guess I should have brought my glasses.
Okay, y'all ready to start?
We're ready.
Okay. Welcome to this negotiation session. Looks like it's about 5 till 10. We're starting. We passed around and did the sign-in sheets, and each party, I know that we have our original, and we've handed the original to y'all, so you should have that. I just want to remind you that we have the public postings for the next meeting. Next meetings that have been posted are Thursday, February 26th, here at the same location, Del Mar Economic Development Center, room 108. And then Thursday, March 5th, 2015, Del Mar Economic Development Center, room 108, both starting at 9:30 a.m. And March 5th is the deadline to submit all initial proposals for both parties. I think we need to start looking at scheduling meetings for after that, because I know our calendars all fill up pretty quickly.
I had, Roxy, that we had identified tentative dates for March the 11th.
Okay.
Which is Wednesday of the second week in March. And I'm going to be out of pocket the spring break week.
March 15th.
But then I also had March the 26th, which is a Thursday again.
Okay.
If you want to look at April dates.
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that as well.
Is it 11th and?
11th and the 26th.
Okay.
Thursdays have been working good. You want to do April 2nd and April 9th?
That looks good. I'll confirm with my team that I had tried to tell everybody, kind of let your Thursdays be open, because that had been working well for us. So April 2nd, April 9th?
Yeah.
Okay. We'll confirm those dates before we leave today, so that we can go ahead and do the public
Okay.
postings, and so there's no issue on the public notice. We had talked about that week of March 15th. I know that you're going to be out and we're not going to hold a session that day. You had requested to add days to the meeting period to that. We're willing to do that if that's what you wanted to go ahead and do.
Sure. You mean add days?
Yeah.
To take.
And what we could do is we can just take the week and add those 7 days, Sundays through
So what's our
Saturday.
what's the end of our current 60-day period? Do we know?
I think it was somewhere around April 6th. I had it noted down somewhere and I don't have it in front of me. But as you recall, we started January 22nd, but that was the only day that counted, and then it didn't start counting until February 5th, I think. I can't remember if it was 4th or 5th. But when I counted, I recall it ended sometime on a Friday.
Friday would be like
And
April the 3rd or 10th.
Maybe it was 3rd.
Well,
I'd have to count back, but
an extra week would make it till the 10th.
okay.
So.
And we'll confirm that date as well, what that would.
You know, and obviously, if we don't have a contract by then, we're certainly willing to consider,
Absolutely.
you know, extending. So, I mean, we're hopeful that by that time we'll have substantial progress. So.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I just want, you know, the same like when I was out, I didn't want it to be a detriment to either party, and we will definitely extend the same courtesy to y'all.
So I'm gonna. Okey-doke.
Okay.
So I
go
have
ahead.
put those dates in my calendar. If any of those dates don't work, please let me know as soon as possible.
We'll try to confirm those dates before the end of before we end today.
Okay. So we're looking at the March 11th, March
5th.
26th.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the February and the early March date are already set.
Yes.
So the 11th, the 26th, the 2nd, and the 9th.
Yes. Okay, so we'll confirm that.
Taking out her league and taking out your league.
Okay, Johnny is saying that if he counts the days, he thinks it extends us to April 13th. So,
Okay.
which, you know, very close to what we were saying, so.
Okay. We'll confirm that date as well, just so that we're all on the same page.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if we wanna.
Okay. I just wanted to follow up on the data that you had requested from the union on the ones we were looking at were Article 10 wages, Article 11 supplemental pays, and I know that you're updating that today at some point.
I just sent you the updated Article 11
Right.
proposal, and what I've done is I've tried to highlight in yellow where I changed the original proposal.
Okay.
It was just to accommodate things that are in the EMS article proposal, so
Okay.
I think they'll be pretty, you know, it makes more sense to
evident.
put all the pay stuff in one place. You had a couple of pay provisions that would turn out to be in the EMS article. So
Okay.
one or two, I can't remember which, but.
Okay. We'll look at that.
Now, let me just say this, with these proposals, with the exception of possibly updating some appendices, I think I've given you everything. I'm going to double check with my team when we go back into caucus, but I think we pretty much have given you the entirety of the contract, at least at this point, that we're proposing.
Okay. And just so that we can here put it on the record and make sure that we're both talking about the same thing here at this meeting, you've updated the Article 11 supplemental pays, which you've sent to me this
Mhm.
morning.
That's correct.
Let's see, we have Article 23, which is identified as promotions, and you've also sent that to me this morning.
Mhm. Article 30, which is the miscellaneous,
Okay.
and Article 33, which is emergency medical services.
Okay, and then appendices, forms A1, A2, and A3 for our
Yeah, those are all the
consideration.
dues deduction forms, and they've been slightly updated. And I'm going to look through the other, you know, we currently have the other stuff. What I think we have never given you forms for is what I've labeled as appendices E1 and E2, which would be city grievance forms. But the other stuff, we just need to look at it. Obviously, Appendix B, which is the callback procedures, we're not proposing any amendments in that. C, which is the fire department alcohol and drug policy, we're not proposing any changes to that. We'll look at the grievance forms to see if they need to be updated, and we'll provide you, hopefully today, a form for E1 and E2.
Okay.
And that, I think, if you look at the status sheet, it's highlighted in yellow the things that we provided today, but that's the entire contract as we envision it.
Okay.
The order of the articles is not necessarily a given. If there's a
Absolutely.
different order that makes more sense, we're fine with that. But
Okay, but the substantive part and the context of the what you envision the contract looking like is encompassed by all these proposals you've put here today. Okay. All right. We are going to, well, before we move on to that, I just wanted to, before I get off of my little list here, because then I'll forget, that data that we had requested with regard to wages and supplemental pays and drag up, we just wanted to follow up on receiving that data.
and you hopefully we'll receive that today. My team has been working and have some numbers. I haven't had a chance to look at them
Okay.
with them yet. I was thinking we would do that while y'all are caucusing and looking at our new proposals.
Okay.
And so hopefully we'll have something for you today.
Okay. The next item is that I do have some proposals from the city to give to you. I have printed them out, and I'll email them as soon as I pass them over. Let's see. 2, 4, 6. And these are part of our initial proposals. Like I said, when we're presenting this to you, we wanted to present it in the context of a contract as well. Now, this isn't the entire contract that we're envisioning. Just please recall that we have until March 5th we're working on the rest of our proposals. So this, if you look at this, isn't just it. We have other proposals that we're going to insert in here as we go along. And these are our initial proposals. This is where our position, the beginning of our position. I apologize for the date. Apparently, I was a week behind, but I think I marked it off that it's identified as city's initial proposals for 2/2015. When I email it to you, it will be corrected.
Okay.
And so what we're looking at is a 10-page document. And what I'm going to go over the subject matters covered by this, just because that way we can all be on the same page. Page 2 is our proposal on the preamble and intent. Page 3 is it's the non-discrimination proposal that we had TA'd on the substance part. The only difference is here is that we had noticed throughout the entirety of all of these contracts, there was the union has always been identified as the union, and so we just reflected that for consistency within the contract. Of course, that's not really a big substantive thing, so we'll work on that in the organization of the contract once we agree, try to finalize it. Page 4 and 5 is our proposal on management rights.
Mm-hmm.
Page 6, this is a section called working conditions, and there will be several proposals that come under there. At this point, we have the proposals with regard to the validity of the promotional list, which I believe we've already put on the table, but we just inserted it here, and alternative hiring, the same thing.
Okay.
On page 7, we have a category called compensation, and we intend to put all economic proposals under this particular section. Anything that goes towards the compensation of the firefighters.
Okay.
Right now we have mileage reimbursement, meal reimbursement. Those were already on the table. We've added uniforms, and then legal defense. I apologize. Legal defense is actually, I believe, supposed to be under working conditions, but we can fix that organization as we go. But there's a legal defense proposal in there, and that's on page 8. Page 9 is entitled Collective Bargaining Negotiations and Impasse Procedures. Right now we have a proposal with regard to the duty to bargain in good faith. And on page 10, we have a proposal with regard to the Labor Management Committee.
Where's the Labor Management Committee? What article would that be in? The employee rights or the?
I believe it is actually.
Might be in the miscellaneous.
It is in the, because it's separate and apart
Okay.
from what I recall. Yeah, it's Article 12, and it's under, it's kind of weird in the old contract because it was, even though it was a labor management committee with regard to different issues, it was under the health and welfare article. It was kind of, quite fit there. I think that
Mhm. No, I
it
think-
covers health and welfare deal, but it also covers other issues, the way it's written and the way that I understand the Labor Management Committee has been working.
Yeah, what's that?
It was kind of misplaced. It's on page 35 of the contract.
Mhm. We put Labor Management Committee in our Article 30, Section 4. So, and then working conditions, it looks like you pulled from several articles there. The validity of promotional list would be in our promotions article. So that would be Article 23. Alternative hiring would be in our, let's see,
I don't know. if
would be
this-
in our hiring procedures. That would be Article 22. And then compensation, that's all Article 10 and 11. Collective bargaining, negotiations and impasse procedures, that would be probably 27 and 28. And then labor management, Article 30, Section 4. Okay.
You also had a preamble.
Yeah, preambles, Article
Article,
1.
right.
Now, you're breaking my heart here, Roxy. Article 5, non-discrimination, I thought we had a TA on that.
The-
It's the same wording.
Oh, is it? Oh, okay.
No, it's exactly the same wording. That's why I was
Okay.
saying the only.
Well, once we got a TA, you don't have to give me a proposal.
Right, well, and I was just putting it in the context of what we envision the contract.
Oh, I see.
The difference was just the identification of the union. I think in yours it says association, but when we look at the other proposals and the contract that we've dealt with since the 70s, it's always been identified as a union, and that's the
Okay.
only, the substance is exactly the same. I'm not trying to break your heart,
Oh, no.
Greg.
I
just wanted to
Organize
organize it and to show you this is what we think that the contract should look like. And then that way we can
Okay.
all be on the same page and we can all negotiate. And while we're negotiating, knowing that all, one provision is gonna affect another provision, and that way we can all take that at the same time. Like, as you know, when you did did your EMS proposal that affected supplemental pays,
Sure, absolutely.
so that's the reason I'm doing it this particular way.
Okay. So, how much more stuff do you think you're gonna try and cover between now and March the 5th? Other than what's here?
Oh, there's a lot of other areas. I don't have I don't have a status sheet like you do that I can prepare for you. Obviously, one of the things that we're working on is also something that's very important to these, a contract like this is a grievance procedure, an impasse procedure. There's obviously other working conditions that we're
Right.
looking at,
Right.
items like that. So at this point, I don't have a definitive list to you, but we will have all of our proposals on the table by March 5th.
Okay.
Or by the end of the close of the session on March 5th.
Okay.
And that's our timeline, that's what we're working really hard to get done. When I email it to you, Craig, do you want me to copy Johnny and Carlos?
Yeah,
as well?
that would be great.
Okay, I have emailed that electronic document to you, and the correct date of February 20th will be reflected in that document.
Okay, go.
From our side, this is what, all that we have for this morning. We would like to caucus in order to review the proposals that you have placed on the table and to continue to work on our proposals as well, see if we can get anything else on the table today.
Okay, and we'll, I'm sorry, I didn't.
No, go ahead.
And we'll look at your proposals, and when we get it together, maybe we can ask whatever questions we have back and forth about our
Absolutely.
respective proposals. We'll also work on getting you that economic data, and we will, and I'll look at these appendices too. So.
Okay, since we all have a lot of on our plate, and I was kind of thinking maybe getting back together about 2:30, something like that, to allow for a short lunch, and we both have y'all are
Yeah.
preparing stuff and looking through stuff, so I was just kind of gonna throw it out there.
Yeah, we'll be in our lair, and we'll be ready to go when y'all are. So.
Okay, so probably about 2:30, I'll go visit with y'all and let you know where we're at and see where you're at, so see if we're ready to come back to the table and start discussing.
Okay.
Okay?
Let me make sure I'm gonna get your.
Make sure it's not, my outbox is empty, so it
It's
should
still
have
on.
gone out.
Yeah, I'm still hooked up.
AT&T. They're probably betting it right now.
Got it. Very good. Okay, thank you all.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
On the tentative dates that we have set, so far they look good, but I have a team member, Yasmin, is going to be out on April 2nd and 9th, and Steve will be the alternate.
Excuse me.
Sid?
March 26th.
I'm sorry.
and April 2nd.
She'll be out March 26th and April 2nd, so Steve Yara, who's our alternate, will be substituting in for her, and I haven't been able to confirm those dates with him. So I will do that, and first thing Monday morning, I'll call you and verify the date so we can put the postings out.
Yeah, and Roxy, I mean, I'm happy to hear about like when some of your team members are gonna have to miss, but I'll, as long as you got a quorum, that's the important thing, I think.
Absolutely. Okay.
And, don't feel like you have to keep me posted minute for minute. I never know myself which of these guys are gonna show up. So far, they're doing pretty good, but, who knows?
Yeah, and and it's important that I make sure that I have the proper people here, because we'll be in the midst of negotiations, and we can't predict what proposals we're going to be talking about that day, so I want to at
No, I
least
hear
kind
you.
of plan to make sure that if Yasmin needs to talk about something, that she's going to be here when we talk about those proposals. And if something like that does come up, and we do have to kind of schedule, like, well, one person who has that operational knowledge and the all that, the info and the data, I'll make sure to let you know so that we can just be sure that the proper person's here, and just for efficiency purposes, etc.
Okay.
So that's why it's just full disclosure.
Okay. And so, just to make sure I've got all the dates, we're gonna meet next Thursday, the 26th of February.
Yes.
We've got meetings that are set for March the 5th, March the 11th, March the 26th, then April the 2nd, and April the 9th.
Yes.
And then the 60-day period right now is set to run on April the 13th, if we counted the days right.
I believe that's so.
Okay.
But whatever the 60 days is, but it falls in that, it's sometime around there.
Okay. Okay, very good. I've got them all calendared. And
Okay. Yeah, and that's because we're adding those 7 days, not counting the week of March 15th.
yeah,
Is that correct?
that's right.
Okay. Do you want, I have some questions on the proposals that you gave to us this morning, and I just see that you have emailed to us the current information that you have in support of the pay proposals. You said that you're continuing to update, so I expect that there will be some more information coming in
I
that
think so.
regard?
I think
Okay.
so. You know, we're having trouble getting some of the locals to get us their current, you know, cert pay, supplemental pays.
Okay.
And so we don't have some of that information. There are a lot more, but let's go over real quickly
Sure.
what we have provided to you. Hang on a second, let me get it open. There are two comparisons here. The first is a comparison with 24 cities, all Texas cities, in terms of base salary. And what it shows is a pretty bleak picture, actually. So why did we pick these 24 cities? These are the exact cities that you use with your police department. The pay comparisons that you use every year with your police department in terms of trying to catch your police department up with the average. We have used those exact same cities with regards to the data that we're providing. What we find is that, and with Corpus, of course, that's a total of 25 cities, and what we find is, in terms of our average salary, if you compare Firefighter 1, Firefighter 2, captains, and battalion chiefs, that our average monthly salary puts us, I think, in 22nd or 23rd place among 25 cities. That the only cities that are doing more poorly than us right now, the three cities that are doing more poorly than us right now are Waco, Brownsville, and McAllen. Brownsville and McAllen, of course, in the valley have much fairly depressed economies right now because of the border situation, and have I think much lower cost of living. In fact, if you injected the cost of living index into this, I think that our stats might be even a little worse. Whereas Corpus is, I think, at the 90-something percentile, like 92nd percentile on the average cost of living. Brownsville and McAllen are down in the high 70s or low 80s. Okay. So what this shows is that we're well behind the average, and to the tune of, in fact, the average of the 24 cities is about 6,600, and our average is below 5,800. So just using that number, you know, that's like almost a $900 a month difference. Well, let's call it 800 to be fair, but 800 times 12 that's $9,600 a year. That's what we're below the average of the 25 cities. That's a 15% difference between what we're paying and the average of these cities. So although we've made specific pay proposals, and you know, we know that y'all are going to counter with whatever your pay proposals are, you know, we are interested in the sort of the averaging that you do with your police department, and wonder if that might not provide a solution for the fire department as well. Now the other...
Before you move on, I have a couple questions on
Sure.
the base wage information that you have provided to us. It looks like, and I'm assuming you're using the same 24 cities you've identified for each of the categories of information that you're providing.
For certification pay, yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same comparison.
Okay, because I think they were just arranged differently. One was in, I think in order of average salary, highest to lowest, and then the rest were in alphabetical order. So I just wanted to clarify that so that I make sure that I understand what
That's
I'm
right.
talking
That's
about.
right. We did rearrange the base pay comparison just to make it easier for those of us who are not math majors, and that would be me.
Okay, well,
But in certification pays, because they're all over the map, you know, Abilene may pay more in one certification pay than does Amarillo, and
Right.
in the next it's flip-flop. So we just put those in alphabetical order.
okay.
And
Go ahead.
as you go on to the second and third page, that lists some of the certification pays. Some of them are pays, you know, that you don't oh, no, I'm sorry, these are all pays that you provide, but you can see that what we've done is we've taken the other 24 cities, and for those cities for which we currently have data, we've done an average. Many of the categories, for example, EMT paramedic, most of the cities are accounted for. Some of the ones that aren't, for example, Austin does, has a separate standalone EMS, Austin Travis County EMS. Although I do believe that Austin pays EMT certification pay, and I ought to be able to get that information to you guys for them because I'm bargaining for them on Monday. So, but at any rate, for those that we do have information, and how much stock you can put in this until we have total information, I'll let you decide.
Okay.
But you can see that for those cities that we do have information, and some of the cities like Waco are cities that are below you in base salary, but you can see that even if you just compare Waco on almost every certification for which they provide certification pay and we provide certification pay, they're ahead of us. And in terms of the average, in I believe every single category, we're paid considerably less than the other cities that we have in this network. For example, for fire intermediate certification, the average of about the 12 to 13 cities we have so far is $93 a month. Corpus pays $20. For advanced fire certification, the average is $150. Corpus pays $25. For master certification, the average is $227. Corpus pays $30. EMT basic, we only have about 5 cities so far. We have a lot of work to do there, but the average of those 5 cities is $128. Corpus pays $35. The average for EMT paramedic certification is $257, and we've got a large number of cities in that category already. Corpus pays $75. An inspector in prevention, the average is $195. Corpus pays $35. So if you look at the same cities that you use to compare police wages, when you set wages for your police department via collective bargaining, you can see that our fire department is well behind the game. It's a little hard to just give an overall number. I mean, what we'd like to do is say, let's take Austin and take their base pay and all their supplemental pays and let's come in an average. But that's hard to do because every city doesn't give exactly the same certifications. Right. So, I mean, we can try and do that analysis, but that may, we might need an economist or something like that. And, you may want to consider also cost of living. I don't think that you do consider cost of living with regards to the comparisons you make in your police department, but I would note that we're not shying away from the fact that Austin, for example, has a higher cost of living. I'm sure that some of the other major metropolitan areas that's true too, but that's balanced out somewhat by the fact that some of these, San Antonio being an example, and certainly the cities in the valley, Laredo, McAllen, Brownsville, El Paso, all of those have a lower cost of living. So, these are the numbers that we have right now. We want this to be a cooperative effort. We welcome your feedback. If you want to use a different set of cities, to make comparisons to, well, we would say fine, but we would ask, why would you want a different set of comparator cities for the police and the fire departments in Corpus Christi? That wouldn't make a lot of sense to us. But be that as it may, these are the numbers. We're going to continue to work to fill in some of these missing blanks. But already we've got a considerable amount of data that we're providing to you, and I think that when you look at it and you vet the data, you're going to see that we're not really fudging the numbers, at least not in any way that's obvious to me.
Okay. On these cities that you identified, did they all have the same rank structure?
No.
Are there different rank structures and duties assigned with those, or comparable duties?
They're relatively similar.
Okay.
Obviously, in some of the bigger fire departments, Austin goes from firefighter to driver to lieutenant to captain. You guys have firefighter 1, firefighter 2 EMS, firefighter 2 driver, captain,
Okay.
okay? Austin has above their battalion chief rank, for example, I know that Austin has both the division chiefs and assistant chiefs. Now, I know you have an assistant chief and a deputy chief here, so the titles are going to be different, but they all have relatively similar rank studies. I believe that, a lot of them go from firefighter to driver to lieutenant to captain. You, for whatever reason, have to, name them firefighter 1, firefighter 2, captain. You're going to see those kinds of things. But, in terms of their relative rank in the hierarchy, we are trying to compare apples to apples.
Okay. Now, and then on the, for instance, the base salary wages, I know that you've done them in an order which shows the highest to lowest, and you've come up with an average, and you've stated that the Corpus, according to these numbers, falls at below average or in the bottom tier of those cities. In ranking these by the average salary and making that statement, is there any consideration that has been done with regard to some of these base wages kind of absorbing supplemental or other ad pays that may not be given by some cities but absorbed into the base salary to account for that? Do you know what I'm
Yeah, I know what you're saying. In other words, what if, the total amount of supplemental pays that are available, in
Or
those
less.
cities are less?
Right,
And a
and
good
incorporate it
example of
into
that.
the base pay.
Yeah. I have a pretty good familiarity with a lot of Texas cities because I am, affiliated with the state association. I can tell you, for example, that Houston has a rather depressed base salary, but do provide a lot of ad pays. Okay. But for the most part, I think you're comparing apples to apples because, if you look at the ad pays, we're listing the ad pays that Corpus pays, and in every single case, Corpus is well below the average in every single one of the pays. Plus, obviously you can't just add all the supplemental pays together and add them to base salary, because whether or not you get a particular supplemental pay depends on whether you have that certification or that assignment or whatever the case may be. I mean,
And it
most
also
people are
accounts
not in the
for-
hazmat unit and don't get hazmat
Right.
pay. Only some have EMT paramedic certification.
Some
Only
cities require paramedic certification as a condition of employment, so that's something else that you also need to consider. So when you're talking about comparing apples to apples, I think, you have to look at the entire picture, because a base salary alone does not tell the whole story. But we will definitely look at this, and that's what we're trying to do, a fair assessment.
And Roxy,
so
that's the
what
point.
That's what we want to take into
Yeah.
account.
I do, and that's the point I want to make, is that I think you're going to find that the supplemental pay situation worsens, not improves, but worsens the base salary situation for Corpus firefighters, because what you're seeing in every single certification or supplemental pay category, you're seeing Corpus, gotta remember which city I'm in. You're seeing Corpus, not just poorer than the average, but considerably poorer than the average. I mean, this is really a stark picture. I mean, Corpus Christi firefighters, if you're going to compare them to other firefighters in the city, they're underpaid. I think you're going to have a really hard time making a case otherwise. And I think especially when you look at the fact that the city, has chosen this group of cities to compare for purposes of setting pay and benefits in the police department, that, it seems fair to use that same group of comparators for your other public safety department, which is fire/EMS, and to say, okay, we've got our comparator cities, now let's look and see. And so, we'll fill in these blanks as best we can, and we'll look at any way, but, numbers can often be made to represent almost anything you want. And so I expect you to try and poke holes in our numbers. But I also expect you're going to have trouble doing that.
Okay.
So.
Well, I appreciate the data, and we'll go through it and evaluate it, and I'm sure we're going to have questions about understanding, how you're using this. That way we can fully understand how you're using this to base your proposals on. Also, in any of this data, are you considering any of the cost of benefits also?
When you say cost of benefits?
Cost of benefits, and that's like the kind of a total compensation package. I know that we're talking about wages and actual money that goes into the pockets of the firefighters, but taking into consideration also that some of these base wages and add-on pays are affected by the amount of compensable benefits that are also given. Like some firefighters may have a very rich healthcare plan that's a high value plan, and because of that, it affects the base pay and other supplemental pays. And when you look at the total compensation, even though a wage may seem low, when you add in all the benefits such as healthcare, any retirement, contributions, etc., anything like that, then that's a whole picture that we can look at. Is that something that you all are also have you all gotten any of that info?
We certainly can do that. Again, I'm going to tell you just anecdotally, and I have seen those kind of numbers run.
Yeah.
But I can tell you anecdotally that I do not think that Corpus provides a rich benefit package in terms of pension and health care benefits, which are the big two. I do not think that they provide a benefits-rich package vis-a-vis other Texas cities. I know that in Austin, for example, I believe that the city contribution to their pension fund is 21% or 23% of salary, something like that. It's a similar number for San Antonio. I'm talking off the top of my head, so please don't hold me to the numbers. But I mean, Corpus is not out of whack with other cities in terms of the benefit packages they provide, at least pension-wise. I'm not, quite frankly, very familiar with Corpus health benefit package, and I'm certainly willing to look at any comparable data that y'all want to present. But at the end of the day, you're right. I mean, total compensation is the goal. Does our total compensation compare with these other cities? Corpus is kind of unique. There are certainly 6 or 7 cities that have more population than Corpus. There's a number within these 24 that have less population. But Corpus is kind of in the middle of a sort of a large gap, that something like 300,000 population. The next largest city is, a number of thousands less, and the next smallest city above them is, substantially larger too. So, I don't think we really need to reinvent the wheel in terms of the comparator cities. But I do think that if we're going to try ultimately and justify the wage and benefit package for Corpus firefighters by comparing them to other cities, we do need to get as much agreement as possible between the two parties about what the actual comparison should be.
Okay, and we'll I'm sure that discussion will occur once we get down that road. One of the things that I know will be an issue is I know that there's 24 cities that are identified for the police department, and as you know, the police department is an entirely different entity from the fire department. They do, even though they're both public safety, they engage in 2 completely different functions, and so they have a different organizational structure, different duties, etc. So what we're interested in is to find cities that are the most comparable or the closest, and I know we can't find perfect matches, that's impossible, but that are the closest that we can compare to what our fire department is here in Corpus Christi. And so that is the goal, to make a fair and equitable assessment and evaluation, and that's where our goals are based in.
Yeah, I got you. I mean, I hear what you're saying, but I'm always going to ask you, so just be prepared when you say, well, yes, Abilene is a city we feel like we should compare the police departments, but not the fire departments. My question is always going to be why?
Right, I expect that.
They both have, both police and fire have totally different jobs. That's true, but they're both public safety jobs. They both put their lives at risk. We've had both fire and police injured this year in this course and scope of duty. Police as recently as yesterday, firefighters not just a few months ago. And so I certainly understand that they're different, but both functions are vital. And it would surprise me that you could make a case that there are 24 cities that you should compare for police department, but not for fire. But I'm not, I don't know what the arguments are going to be yet, so I'm an open book.
I don't either. We'll get there, I'm sure.
A lot of times I make arguments and I don't know what they're going to be when I start.
That's right. Okay. Well, I appreciate, thank you for getting that data for me, and we look forward to seeing updates on that. Let's see.
Okay. Do you want to ask us questions about our proposals? Do you want me to ask my questions about your proposals? Or?
It's up to you, really. I have some basic questions on, let me find my Word documents. Let's see, we have 3 new proposals, and I can probably get through our questions pretty quick.
Okay.
So let me go ahead and just start, since it'll kind of finish up what we need to fully evaluate what we've got.
Yeah, by the end of the day, with your questions answered, you'll at least have our whole
That's
initial
right.
proposal.
So let's go ahead and do that, and then we can, whatever we don't finish today on the questions that I'm sure you have a lot of questions on our proposals. that
Not
we
a
can
lot,
get to. Okay.
But, in fact, I was already formulating some counters
Okay.
when y'all came in, but let's start with ours first. You want to look at 11
Yeah,
first? Or?
on 11, the supplemental pays, let's see, we have, on section 2, there was an addition in there, and it brought up the question of, okay, on the certified EMT, that's the same, but you added a certified paramedic supervisory. On the certified EMT, does
I'm
that...
sorry, where are you on section 2?
Section 2 of 11,
Oh,
under
you-
the certification pays.
Wait a minute, I'm sorry, I opened the wrong one. No wonder. It's the same thing earlier.
That's difficult because I have a lot of them opened up.
Yeah, this was a provision that we found in, it was in the EMT, the EMS article of the current contract.
Okay.
There was a supervisory paramedic function, as well as the assistant EMS director, and there were pay provisions in the EMS article for both of those. So I tried to take them out of that article and put them in the supplemental pays article, which is 11.
Okay, and from your perspective, what does a supervisory certified paramedic mean? A certified paramedic in a supervisory position?
I'm going to have to defer to Johnny.
That's our EMS supervisor.
623. I don't know what
I don't know
623 is.
either.
but-
That's the EMS supervisor.
Okay, well, who occupies that, and how is their job different from an ambulance person?
It's a captain position, and he supervises all the EMS for that shift.
Is it just, so it's a shift commander for EMS?
Basically, yes.
Okay.
Okay, and this is
EMS
under the
shift commander.
assistant EMS director?
No.
No,
Or,
it
I
is,
mean-
it is the assistant
No,
EMS director.
no.
No,
No.
it's not.
It's not Vicky's position?
It's technically the field supervisor. There's one per shift.
There's only 3 of them, one for each.
One per shift, and it's about three of them?
It's 3.
And he works under operations, right, Ricky?
What's the rank?
Captain.
And he works under operations, under the operations chief.
I'm sure it probably takes some medical guidance from both the medical director and the assistant EMS director,
Correct.
but also reports to the operations commander, who would be a voucher.
Oh, the operations chief is an assistant chief.
The shift commander for the entire ship is at what rank?
That's Randy Page, assistant chief,
Operations.
assistant operations.
Is there one for each shift, or?
It's him for everybody.
It's him for all shifts.
Okay.
Okay. So, and this is different.
But he's got an administrative job, right?
Correct.
40 hours, so when he's not on duty.
Reports
is
to that one.
It's run by battalions.
Reports to that one.
Okay.
I'm not so sure that it reports to the operations chief.
So who reports to the assistant EMS director?
Nobody.
We don't have an EMS director.
Or what is the,
Who reports to Mickey is what she's asking.
right? I'm s-
Nobody.
Really,
Just
nobody.
hours, right? Just hours?
Yeah.
Directly, I mean, as far as activities on a day-to-day, those are set usually by policy. Anything administrative usually does go to the assistant EMS director from 623.
Her duties are more administrative. in
Okay.
nature.
Okay. And on the certified EMT add-on pay, that's just for EMT basic, right? That doesn't include EMT paramedic. That's covered by the certified paramedic pay. Is
That's
that right?
covered by paramedic pay,
Okay,
yeah.
I just want to clarify that.
It would include, I think, EMT basic, and do they still have EMT
No,
intermediate?
not anymore.
Okay.
Okay,
So it's just EMT now.
basic.
And there's not very many of those, very few of those.
And then on basic instructor, does that cover a basic instructor under EMT and fire? An
The
EMT?
only instructors that we have are fire.
In the academy, or in the training division?
Or EMS, I'm sorry, EMS instructors? A basic
You
EMS
have
instructor?
fire and EMS.
No,
instructors.
EMS instructors are all advanced.
Yeah.
There's no basic
Not in
EMS
basic.
instructors.
Yeah, right. There's
Okay.
not any
Basic
more
only
fire.
fire.
So a basic instructor is only fire.
But you also have
And-
advanced instructors.
And Roxy, these are, you know, levels of certification. I mean, the Commission on
That's
Fire
right.
Protection, or with EMS, it's probably the health department, right, that does the certification.
State Department. State
State
Department.
Health Department, yeah.
That's right.
These are all state certifications. And the reason I crossed out the Commission on Fire Protection is because, in fact, the State Health Department does do the EMS certification.
Okay. And then, so is the intermediate, advanced, or master instructor certification pay covers the instructors under fire and instructors under EMS? Because I know that there's some, let's see, this is the info I have, there's advanced and master instructors on fire, but there aren't those levels on EMS, is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then on the top, you deleted firefighters who currently possess, and you deleted current.
Only reason we deleted currently is because, I mean, if somebody gains a certification in the future, we don't, you know.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering what that effect was, and it's not to limit it, not to prevent
Not to
somebody
limit
from
it to who
gaining.
possesses on the date the agreement is ratified,
Okay.
but when you certainly are not entitled to the certification pay unless you currently possess
Okay.
the certification, but if you get it in the future, you'll become entitled to the pay. So that kind of confused some of my folks, and I thought if it confused them, it might confuse y'all too.
Yeah, I just needed clarification on the effect of that. And then let's move on to section 3 on assignment pay. You deleted the ambulance pays and substituted it with an ambulance $50 per shift.
You had in your 2014 proposals gone away from the monthly stipend, and you had proposed a $25 per shift assignment pay. So we kind of like your approach. And so, but we did ask for a modest increase in the $25 amount to
Okay.
well, 100%, that's modest.
Do you, do you know, happen to know the cost difference between moving from that per month or add-on to a per shift add-on? Did y'all
You
do any
know,
of that?
we don't know that, and
Okay.
I'll tell you why. It's because we don't know in any given month how many shifts a person is going to be assigned to the ambulance. In a perfect world, a firefighter will 2 shifts on the fire truck and 2 shifts on the ambulance. Right now, because of staffing concerns, the ratio is probably more 3 to 1. Also, if a firefighter, firefighter typically will be scheduled 10 shifts per month, 1 every 3 days. But if a firefighter takes vacation or holidays, or not holiday, vacation or a sick leave or a Kelly day occurs, it's going to affect the number of shifts that he or she works in that month. So, in other words, the level, it won't be a consistent level, it'll go up and down.
Okay.
But it is an assignment pay, and so it will more closely reflect, when they're actually being assigned the duty.
Then I want to move on to section 6 on performance award. Is the performance award based on any kind of evaluation or criteria?
No, the performance award is,
Historical.
they're telling me I may not understand my own proposal, which won't be the first time that happens to me.
Do we need to go back up?
Yeah, let's go
Okay.
back. Johnny is saying that the number of assignments per month would not in fact
You want me
change.
to explain it?
Sure.
On the assignment pay, the number of assignments every month will not change. Whether a guy takes a Kelly day, calls in sick, a vacation, a personal leave, FEMLA, whatever his leave is, it doesn't matter because you still gotta have 22 people on the ambulance every day. It doesn't change whether it's,
You're saying the amount that the city pays will
right.
change?
Right.
The amount you pay will not change.
But the amount that the firefighter gets each
Yeah.
month will change.
Okay,
Right.
Okay.
I understand.
So I did understand.
And is,
On to section 6, that is a historical artifact. Performance awards were started in one particular contract, and in fact, I'm saying I'm getting that from Article 5, Section 7. Hang on a second. If you look at page 17 of the current contract, it just says that every November, each firefighter gets a lump sum payment of $150. And I believe that that started like 2 or 3 contracts ago and has remained in the contract ever since. It has become something of a, probably a Christmas bonus for firefighters. You know, it's a little extra money that they get each year. I don't think, are adverse to looking at, you know, how that benefit might otherwise be paid, but it is not tied to performance. It's a lump
Okay.
sum payment that everybody gets.
Why did you call it performance award?
Why was it called a performance award? I don't know. That's
So that's
several
in the
contracts.
contract?
It's been about 10 contracts.
Actually, I know why they changed that.
Okay.
For political correctness, it was called holiday pay initially, when we put it in there. And someone on your side of the table wanted to change it to its current name.
So if you're still performing your job, you get a performance award.
so the purpose initially was for some sort of like a holiday pay or a Christmas bonus kind of deal?
That, well,
Yeah. Except you can't call it that anymore.
right.
Be politically correct.
Okay, that's all the questions I have right now on Article 11.
Okay.
Save and close, so I don't get mixed up. Okay, on Article 23,
Yes.
promotions. I didn't see too many changes on this from the old contract, is that correct? I just want to
That
make
is
sure.
correct.
Okay.
It's, I think it's a lot clearer,
Okay,
the way it's written now than it was under the old contract. But it is not intended to change the status quo. It is, you know, if you look at section 7 at the very end, I pulled that from an entirely different section of the contract, but everything else, you can see pretty much dovetails into Article 9 of the current contract. Okay. maintains the distinction between firefighter 2 EMS and firefighter 2 driver.
Okay.
That is a feature that I think is pretty unique to Corpus. But whether or
I
not
agree.
you would want to try and change that, what we try to do is, you can see that there is a difference in eligibility requirements for firefighter 2 driver between firefighters hired before and after July 31st, 1996.
Okay. That's section C,
Yeah, it's section 1C.
1C. Yeah, I had some questions on that particular section. One of them was, because you have to kind of look at this, 1C, 2B has that 8 consecutive years as a firefighter 1 prior to becoming eligible to take the examination for promotion to firefighter 2 engineer. And it allows somebody to go directly
If I said
promote.
firefighter 2 engineer, I meant firefighter 2 driver. I apologize.
Okay, I understood it to be driver anyway. I'll put in here driver.
Yeah, I tried to, it was used interchangeably in the
Right.
old contract, and I tried to make it driver throughout.
Okay, well, let's see, and it'll, would this allow, because you also have an EMS proposal that I have to keep in mind, and it was kind of hard to get my head around it, seeing this and with the certification requirements that y'all are proposing. We'll get to those in a minute. But if you know, would this allow a firefighter to drop his paramedic certification after his promotion to a firefighter 2 driver?
I think that they would be allowed to do
Okay.
that, and my team will correct me if I'm wrong. However, it is also my understanding that almost nobody does do that.
But they do have the opportunity to do that. It's
Mhm.
open there. Okay.
Johnny's pointing out to me that they, even if they promote to driver, they do have to keep it for the 8-year period.
Okay.
So it doesn't matter how far up the ladder you go, for that 8 years, you have to keep it.
Okay, but this says that you would be eligible to promote after 8 consecutive years as a firefighter 1. So that's automatically taken care of then?
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. But, the typical progression in the Corpus Fire Department is to go through the driver to EMS. There really aren't very many that go directly from, do their 8 years and go directly from firefighter 1 to, keep in mind, to firefighter 2 driver. Keep in mind that, since 1985, I think it is, we'll get to the EMS thing in a minute, you have to get paramedic certification as a condition of employment within 18 months, and you have to keep that paramedic certification for 8 years. And so, that's going to encompass the 2 years you have to serve as a firefighter 1 before you can test for firefighter 2 driver, firefighter 2 EMS, and most people go that route. A great majority of them do.
There's almost 3 times as many promotions.
Yeah.
On
So
the
if you,
EMS side.
if you want to start moving up the pay ladder, you really got to go through firefighter 2 EMS. And as long as you're a firefighter 2 EMS, obviously you have to maintain your certification.
Okay. This ability for a firefighter 1 to directly go to a firefighter 2 driver,
Mm-hmm.
was that already in the contract?
Yeah.
It is?
Yes.
Okay. Just hard to find.
After the 8 years.
After
It
the
is-
8 years.
It is hard to find,
Yeah.
an attaboy for making it comprehensible. It's not unwarranted. I don't want to get Callis's patting my own self on the back.
Attaboy. Okay, and then, so then as I understand it, on this 2B, with the 8 consecutive years as a firefighter 1, you could potentially be able to drop your paramedic certification before the opportunity to promote if you wanted to wait 10 consecutive years as a firefighter 1 and then promote to a driver, right? Because then you could drop your paramedic certification.
Then you would qualify to go directly to take the firefighter 2 driver test. Again, and the guys will correct me if I'm wrong, but almost nobody does that. Nobody wants to wait 10 years and draw firefighter 1 pay. There's a good bump from firefighter 1 to firefighter 2. No, not a great bump, but a good bump. Well, yeah, you probably heard Johnny's whisper, but what he's saying is almost nobody drops their paramedic certification. What percentage of the department would you say has paramedic certification right now?
Me, 95%.
Yeah, I mean, so the vast majority
Or
of
an
them, whether they have
EMS
the,
certification.
EMS certification.
EMS certification.
Okay. What about paramedic certification?
I would bet you paramedics probably 85.
Okay.
And that's just because some older never were required to have
Yeah.
paramedics. Everybody in the last
We
27
probably got a
years
handful of
had paramedic.
people. I think Chief Quintero probably knows that answer better than me, but
The numbers you gave are pretty close.
I would imagine they're really close.
Right.
so, you know, I mean, there are these provisions that exist in the contract that allow firefighters to do this, that, and the other. That's not what's creating the problem for you in terms of staffing the ambulances. I mean, it's not having not enough certified personnel. You know, 95% have some form of certification, 85% have the highest level of certification. So that's not the problem.
Oh, it is.
Lack of staffing. You don't have adequate staff. In other words, you haven't had a hiring class in 3 years, and as people have hit that 8-year threshold and stopped riding the ambulance, and people have stopped coming up behind them to fill in the gaps, that's created the problem.
So the 8 years is the problem.
The 8 years is,
You said both of those two things.
yeah, that's right. That's right, but the 8-year problem would not be a problem and has never been a problem until you stopped hiring. And you have historically low staffing numbers. Now, we've agreed with one small exception that we're not going to negotiate staffing here, and we're going to hold to that. But it doesn't take away from the fact that it is a real problem that the city needs to address. We're just leaving it up to y'all to address it. But if you try to address it on the backs of the firefighters by just keeping them on the ambulance, you're going to burn them out. The best example I have of that, if you look at Austin, Travis County, where they have a separate EMS department, the running joke is that nobody makes it to retirement. And we say it's a joke, but it in fact is the truth. Nolan Lujan, forgive me, Nolan, for mentioning your name, retired from the Austin, Travis County EMS, and it was like they held a party because it had been so long since anybody retired. They burn out because ambulance runs are so frequent and often so intense. And so you're seeing that wear and tear on your firefighters right now, because whereas they used to spend half their time on the ambulance, now they're spending 3/4 of their time on the ambulance. And what happened was when y'all put 2 additional ambulances in service, which was a good thing, but you didn't increase the staffing level. That's 4 more positions that have to be filled on ambulances. But if you don't increase the staffing levels, then what happens is you have the same number of people that are staffing more ambulances, and that means that they have to ride the ambulance more often. So it's a real problem, and we're trying to avoid trying to address it in the contract, but it's a problem for y'all in terms of burnout. You're going to have some firefighters that are going to be looking to jump to easier departments that don't have that kind of level. San Antonio, by way of example, engineers, usually spend their first 2 years on the ambulance, and then they go into a fire truck assignment. And, so they're rotating in and out, and they don't have that kind of burnout problem that you're beginning to experience here in Corpus. So, and I will say this, that it's my understanding that y'all are getting ready to hire a class. I don't know how big your class is going to be, but hiring a class at all is going to, I think, help with the problem.
Okay, we'll probably be talking more about this here in a second.
Yeah, and let me say this, from day one, Roxy, I've been saying, let's put together a subcommittee, because I think y'all have very legitimate needs in terms of staffing your ambulance program, which my understanding is one of the best, not only in the state, but in the nation. and you have very legitimate needs that we feel need to be addressed, and we want to help with that, but we have legitimate concerns with firefighter burnout. And so the solution, I think, is to get together a group to try, who really know what's happening on the ground from both your side and our side, and try and come up with a win-win solution. I mean, this is not one where I think we should be adverse. You have a very fine EMS function that you should be very proud of. But you've got some challenges in terms of keeping it at that high level.
Okay, on section 4, well, there's actually 2 section 4s. It's the second section 4. On Article 3, 23 promotions, there's a section 4 called corrections to promotional examination questions, and there's a section 4 called notice of promotional exams and source materials. It's the second one I'm talking about.
Okay.
Notice of promotional exams and source materials. On the posting of exam, it says that each January, the Civil Service Director will post the following for all promotional exams to be administered during the 1-year period commencing in April of the same year. And that's in
Right.
January, it says the exam dates. We need clarification on that. Does that mean the exam dates that would happen for the entire year? Because that might be impossible. We may not know that an exam is needed until a vacancy happens.
That's how it's written in your contract currently.
Okay.
Johnny is saying that's not how it actually works in practice.
Right.
So
And
how does it
that's-
work?
They don't know the exam date until there's an
A
actual
vacancy.
opening.
Right. So.
But that is
was-
current contract.
Yeah, that is, and I think, I just want to make sure that what the intent was is to, from your proposal, was to maintain the current practice, because it's not clear from the language from the last contract. So, because it's impossible to be able to post in January any exam dates for the following year, because we don't know when vacancies are going to occur. I know civil service rules require that we do the posting at least 30 days before the actual exam happens. So I just wanted to clarify that, because it was in conflict with what happens and what everybody's in agreement on how it works.
Well, but on that, the city they do post annually the materials that are gonna be used for those tests.
Yeah, that's I'm just
Depending
talking
on
about
what
the
it
dates,
is,
yeah.
And they do, because they just did it, I think in January, and whatever exam comes up during that time, those are all the books they're gonna use.
Right, and that's my understanding too. Customarily, the list of materials and all that stuff is posted for the year. I was just talking about that one bullet point on the exam dates, because it would
They can't
be,
do that.
it's unrealistic. We couldn't be able to post all that stuff for the entire year. So we probably just need to clarify that.
But then that wouldn't
Okay.
listen.
If you could just take
1 year,
that
this,
out.
some of the civil service.
Well, anyway,
I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
you were intending to continue current practice, and that
We
you
were.
weren't wanting the department to test for all ranks once a year kind of deal.
oh no,
and have-
not at all.
Do you know what I'm
The
talking
idea is
about?
just to give, my understanding from the team is that in January, they post the study materials, but then they do later post. The only Civil Service Act requirement is to post at least 30 days in
Right.
advance.
Right.
It may be as simple as just removing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's
And
post
then-
exams pursuant to civil service
Yeah.
requirements. So that's I just wanted to clarify the
No.
intention, because it was,
Right.
that's what we're using all this opportunity to do, is make it
Sure.
clear.
Absolutely.
Okay. And then, let's see, I didn't see any changes on section 5, I apologize, promotional process.
It's exactly
Okay.
mirrors the current contract
Just wanted to make
procedure.
sure, 'cause it was, and then, section 7 looks the same as well. Just want to confirm.
Yeah,
that.
and I apologize for the
Oh, no big deal.
numbering, but I'll try and get that corrected.
At least you had the right dates. I didn't this morning.
Yeah. Mm.
I was a week behind.
Hey, I'm often a week behind, sometimes more.
Okay, so that was 23, right?
Mhm.
And let me save that and get rid of that on my computer. Okay, on 30, miscellaneous. Okay. Section 1's the same from the old contract, and the intent of this is just, that firefighters would be required to respond outside the city only as ordered by the fire chief, right? The fire chief would be the one to make that call or his designee.
Yeah, and I think it goes a little bit beyond that. You may recall that a number of years ago that some Fort Worth firefighters were called upon to do work in another city that was a suburb of Fort Worth under the supervision of another fire department. I think it was a mutual response thing, and were injured. And there was a question about whether they'd be covered for workers' comp purposes. Okay. And so it's just making clear that if they're acting pursuant to Corpus Fire Department orders, they're acting within the course and scope of their duties.
Kind of umbrella. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see, and then section 2, amendments to agreement. I know this is in the last contract, and normally in a private, garden variety contract, this is usually a provision that's in there. But this is, the collective bargaining agreements are more than a garden variety contract. What I wanted to ask on this was, what kind of, would this amendment provision solely be limited to subjects already covered by the collective bargaining agreement that would be ratified and executed?
No, I think that it could be about anything that is a mandatory subject of bargaining.
Okay.
So if there's some issue that later becomes important that neither party thought was important at the time, they could reopen and negotiate an amendment.
So you could add to the contract potentially?
You could add to it, but only by mutual agreement. I mean,
Okay.
It can't be used to hurt either party.
Right. That was my next question was, would this provision be triggered by mutual agreement, or is it just triggered by one party's request?
It's triggered by mutual agreement. Okay. In other words, we can say, hey, city, we really forgot an important topic, and we want to negotiate something about that. And if the city says for whatever reason we don't want to, then we wouldn't. And the reverse is true too.
Okay. If we were to reopen negotiations pursuant to this provision, would it be under the terms of 174, or would be, what terms would be followed?
It would be under 174.
Okay.
I mean, where I've seen this used in other cities in the past, I've seen them use it to, for example, negotiate changes to the hiring process. Maybe there's been some litigation or something like that.
Okay.
Things like that. I've seen them agree to extend. I started to say I've seen them extend promotional lists and things like that. Now that I think about it, I doubt that's true because people have interest on both sides of that issue, so that normally wouldn't happen. But I've seen them do things, to both sides didn't see something coming and they want to negotiate something, and it's a kind of a win-win deal, but they need to to change the contract to do it.
Okay, so this is basically a very limited reopener provision, only triggered by mutual consent.
Absolutely.
Okay. Okay, on section 3, my understanding is the Civil Service Commission here in Corpus Christi really only has, at this point, really only hears appeals and issues with regard to testing, promotions, and hirings, I guess.
Yeah, don't they also set dates and approve the study materials and everything?
Oh,
with
yes.
The city? I mean, they have a number of those kind of housekeeping functions. In
Right.
terms of adjudicatory functions, I think they are limited to promotional exam appeals.
Okay. And at any time, would this prevent a party from obtaining or requesting a transcript at their own expense? It doesn't limit that, right? As
no.
far as I read. Okay.
Mhm.
But it would be at their own expense.
Yeah, I think so.
This just provides the
There's
minimum.
some case law that indicates that civil service commissions are subject to the Open Records and Open Meetings Act.
Mhm.
So whatever the provisions are in the Open Meetings Act about maintaining a record, I guess the commission has to do that.
Okay.
But except for that, there are no requirements with regards to the. This is one of those provisions, quite frankly, that is in your current contract. It doesn't, you know, it's. I don't see that it's controversial or cuts one way or the other. I left it in. You know, I don't know to what extent anybody's ever even looked at it since it got in there.
I think it's the first time I saw it.
Yeah.
I've been looking at it for a long, long time. Yeah, but you know, this is an opportunity because we, you know, like
Sure.
I've said, to make sure we both understand what the intent is, because some of them aren't. You've done a good job reorganizing, rewriting a lot of the stuff and your proposals to make it clearer for us what you're proposing. But as you know, some of the stuff in here is difficult to understand in the old contract. So I just want to make sure that we have a clear understanding of what the intent is. That's the real important part. What's the intent? Okay, on section 4.
I've called Johnny so many times that he's gone from, "Hi, Craig," to, "What do you want this time?" Craig, it's 2 a.m. in the morning.
Yeah.
Johnny, this provision in the contract is so interesting. Civil Service Commission rulings and records. Are you with me?
I'm not the only one having nightmares about that thing. Section 4, Labor Management Relations Committee. I just wanted to make sure that this does not cover grievances or disciplinary appeals. I think you've done separate proposals on those.
Yeah.
And it's not really a reopener or continuous collective bargaining provision. That's it's just a way for communication to occur between the labor or the union and the management, and to give advisory recommendations to the chief or the city on certain issues.
That's my understanding too.
Okay.
It's just a discussion mechanism. It's sort of an open door type thing. It's an opportunity for the two sides to talk about problems as they arise and try and arrange cooperative solutions. It doesn't affect the rights of either under the collective bargaining agreement.
Okay. And then the identification cards, I think that's covered by standards of procedures or policies. I was just wondering if there was, what the purpose was in including this in the collective bargaining agreement. Maybe I don't know the history of it, basically.
I don't either.
Okay.
It's probably been in the contract since the 1970s.
That's right.
If I had to guess. And I saw it in there. I left it in there. I wasn't aware of what your policy is with regards to other city employees.
Okay. And then section 6 refers to the Association Health and Benefit Trust. That's something that city's not involved in, other than pursuant to the old contract, we would make contributions.
Mm-hmm.
The only reason I can see that this would be in here would be to protect the city against any kind of liability on the health and benefit trust. Is that correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's right. I mean, the indemnification obviously protects y'all.
Okay, that answers my questions on that one. Then we'll move on to Article 33, the emergency medical services. Okay, we went through this, and I may be missing some parts of it because it's kind of hard to wrap my head around all of this, but as I understand from your proposal on the certification requirements, it basically creates 4 different tiers of employees.
Right.
The first 3 tiers, and I'm just saying, if I'm wrong, please correct me, but I'm trying to make sure I have a correct understanding of where you're going here. The first 3 tiers are allowed to drop their paramedic certification upon request.
After, in most cases fulfilling the 8-year.
Okay.
I mean, the pre-85 people, that's really only a very small handful of people at this point. Those are people who've literally been in your department 30 years or more.
Okay.
So that's not,
5 years, they'll be gone.
it's, it's John and, 1 or 2 others. And,
5 years, everybody be gone. from the
So
85.
you'll be able to drop this from the next contract maybe. But the bulk of them are under subsection B and subsection C.
Okay.
And let me just say something, I did look at your proposal in crafting this proposal, and subsection D, which is firefighters, on that one, you can see that we're very clearly saying that they're gonna have to be paramedics as a condition of employment throughout their careers. So the purpose, all of section 1, the purpose of the first 3 sections is to preserve the status quo under the existing and prior contracts. It was not an attempt to get anything that they don't now possess, but also to move the department in the direction of permanent paramedic certification. When we first drafted this, I was going to use an earlier date than October 1, 2015. And we're still willing to consider that, but we knew that you had already started hiring another class, and we didn't know what, if any, promises had been made to that class about whether they would have to maintain paramedic certification. If you wanted to include that class, and to do that, you wouldn't have to go back on any promises or commitments you've already made them. We certainly would consider that.
Okay.
We do think that in the long run, it makes sense for the city to require, paramedic certification as a condition of employment. But we also think that that shouldn't, be done, what do you call it, after the fact?
Retroactively.
Yeah, retroactively, to cover people that were made promises different from that.
Okay, so
Again, I want to point out that 95% of your department is certified anyway, and I don't see that changing.
Okay. And so section 1A through C are basically grandfather clauses.
Yes.
At different tiers.
They're grandfather clauses, but they basically condense the language of the current contract and make it comprehensible.
Okay.
So they're grandfather only in the sense that these are the things that existed at the time these people came in and commitments were made to them.
Okay. And the 18 months to get paramedic certification, that's basically allows time from ground zero, or from beginning with no certification at all, and allows you to take all the training and the classes and take the tests.
Yeah, for most of the recruits, when you bring them in, you put them in a fire academy and get them their firefighter certification, and then they're sent to get their EMS certification after they complete the fire academy. And Chief will correct me if I'm wrong about that, but that's the 18-month period, because a lot of times the first several months are spent in the fire academy. And what Johnny's telling me is the whole process to get both certs is 14 months usually.
Okay.
And then 4 months of observation.
Observation.
And it allows them to retake the national test in the event that they fail, since it is a fairly difficult test.
Yeah, that's one thing I want to point out, that I've noticed this just in my own, those tests, those certification tests are getting harder and harder. When you got paramedic certification, that's a real accomplishment. That's a lot of book learning and hands-on experience. So it's not anything that, and of course you've got, advanced life support here in Corpus, so you want very trained people.
That's right.
Because I could stroke out at any time now.
We'll call 911.
Still in this.
Oh boy, I can hear John now. Boy, he's blue. He's been real blue.
Take a picture.
And on this, A, B, and C talks about absent mitigating circumstances, failure to obtain a paramedic certification within so long would constitute grounds for discharge. What do y'all see as mitigating circumstances? What do y'all understand that to be?
It would be something like a family emergency. Say that an employee is 6 months into the academy and gets in a car accident and has to be out for 4 months. And so that's going to push them past the 18 months before they can get in another class and get. It's to take care of that kind of situation. It's not just, well, I didn't study. that wouldn't be, a valid extenuating circumstance. It would be something like a family emergency, something that prevented them, military duty.
Deployment.
Yeah, something like that that prevented them, despite their best efforts, from meeting the 18.
Okay. And I guess that absent mitigating circumstances, would the chief have discretion on granting those extensions for those mitigating circumstances?
I think that the chief would have discretion. I think that to the extent that he exercised his or her discretion unreasonably, well, military duty just doesn't cut it for me. Of course, you'd have USERRA problems then, I think, but I have no reason to believe that your fire chief would act unreasonably with regards to those kinds of things. I do want to point out that I think it would be a rare case in which valid extenuating circumstances would exist.
Okay.
And-
But there's always that one.
If I can give an example, an on-duty injury that requires, up to 12 months, someone falls in that line and you lose, you don't get your CE hours in because you're going through rehab or you're, surgery after surgery after surgery. That's quite possible.
Okay. And I think that's the same, and that mitigating circumstances is used throughout this, and the example you gave was like a recertification, in case you lost it because you weren't able to do your continuing education. Okay. And is it fair, is it 12 months, that's in your eyes a reasonable time in order to gain recertification? I don't know what the timeline is.
The fire department itself provides its own EMS they have an EMS training program they use here locally that's quite good.
Okay.
And it only starts up every so often. And so, it's not like I lose certification today. I have to, I can start class tomorrow. You may have to wait a couple.
You have to wait, okay.
So the 12 months is to encompass that.
Okay.
My understanding from the team is that, that training locally, I think is at Del Mar, or where is it?
Yes.
Is very, they do the training very specific to Corpus Fire Department, and so that's the preferred training. Otherwise, they got to retrain somebody.
Okay.
So.
On voluntary demotions that are talked about in A, B, and C, does the fire chief retain the discretion regarding the request to voluntarily demote?
No. The contract gives the firefighter the right voluntarily to demote if those conditions that are specified in the contract language are met. It's my understanding that this is something that is used very infrequently. Only a handful of firefighters have voluntarily demoted.
I guess if it's not used very frequently, why is it in there? And where does the 8 years come from? Just historically speaking, I don't know.
Historically speaking,
You may not know the answer.
Historically speaking, 8 years was ample for the fire department as other people rose through the ranks. You sort of did your 8 years in this very stressful assignment, and that was enough, and the fire department never had a problem with adequately staffing the ambulances. It's only become a problem recently because of the 3 years without conducting a class. And there may have been very legitimate reasons for not having an entry-level class in 3 years, but obviously you've lost a number of people through retirement and resignation that haven't been replaced. So, and why do we keep it in the contract? Well, it's a right that they have currently, and to retroactively change the rules of the game for them seems unfair. But the thing that I'm saying is I don't think it's a cause for concern for the city, because that is being exercised very infrequently. I like that I have certain rights. I don't exercise them, very often. A lot of people have the right to vote. It's very important to them, but we know that most people don't vote.
How long ago did the 8 years, was the 8 years inserted on that? Does anybody know?
Back in the inception, yeah, 85.
Well, and you think about how much EMS has grown. I mean, there were very few EMS calls compared to now back then. So the number of calls has consistently gone up, so the need for ambulance has gone up as well. So the percentage of calls that are fire versus EMS has gotten really, really skewed over those 30 years or however long. So
I don't
that's
know,
another factor that.
I don't, when was EMS incorporated into the fire department?
1973.
73.
I wouldn't think that the number of EMS calls has gone up except
Oh,
vis-a-vis the
oh, yes, it
population.
has.
Just because
Yes,
the
it
population
has.
has risen? or-
No, it's 80% of the calls are EMS.
It's been 80% since
Oh,
1985
yeah,
when I
it's,
came in.
in
That's
terms of
nothing
percentage
to
of
do
fire
with
department
percentages.
calls, it stayed pretty constant. But what you're saying is just the call volume has grown. And I guess that's just a product of the increase in population. Because, I mean, I would think people are having more medical emergencies now than they were 30 years ago. I mean, I could be wrong, but.
And if I may correct, and if you recall the when we did the Fisher, Gill, and Ellie grievance, I believe you were there, and I believe Lilia was there, it's been a couple of years ago. And you asked some very good questions concerning why this time, and I spoke to you about burning out, retaining quality people long-term, which is something that we do very well here, because we do not force them to bear a workload which is unbearable. You know, you've consistently said, and MGT brought this out, they call it opting out. That is a mischaracterization of what is happening. What is happening is the guys that are on the ambulance, the firefighter 2 EMS, when they get to that, when they've done their 5 years, they have the option of moving over to the fire trucks. They're not opting out of anything, because you have to recall, and you have to keep in mind that on most calls of any kind of serious nature, the first people on the scene are firefighters on a fire truck that are trained paramedics that have all the requisite equipment to administer advanced life support, and that is the chief reason why our scores, national scores, are so high. So they're not opting out of anything. They're just doing it from a slightly different perspective. And our goal is to maintain those trained, qualified individuals, because there was a time when there was a problem having a qualified paramedic on every truck. The chiefs will recall that there was times when they had to move people around from one side of town to the other just to have a paramedic on a truck. That problem has been eliminated through this procedure. Now we're having some difficulties because of, you know, the hiring that has or hasn't occurred, you know, since 2009. But that's something that's going to pass in time. If we return back to a normal hiring attrition regiment, that will smooth out. And the caution for us is to keep the good aspects of our outstanding system, and you know, and tweaking it to make it even better, which we can do.
Okay. Our concerns at this point, with regard to being able to voluntarily demote out of ambulance duty, or the ability to drop paramedic certifications at some point, because I believe even in your proposal on is it C or D? Yeah, on D, they still have the opportunity to demote from ambulance duty, even though they're you know, on D, people in your proposal, people hired after October 1st are going to be required to maintain their paramedic certification. That helps. That is in line with one of the goals of the city, is to make sure that we have paramedics that are available everywhere. The problem with the ambulance demotion and on the other levels, with the majority of the firefighters that we have on board currently, is with the opportunity to demote or to lose or to get rid of that paramedic certification. I understand it doesn't happen often, and you don't have a high percentage of that going on from what you're telling me. but the opportunity is there, you know, that they have the right, and there's nothing that we can do to prevent, you know, all of a sudden 80% of the people who qualify to lose their paramedic certification from losing that. Or from determining, hey, I just don't want to deal with that anymore, let's go. And I'm not saying it's going to happen, but that's a possibility. And there's nothing that we can do, either you or us, that we could do to prevent that. That's just something that is an individual decision on the part of that firefighter. So what we're concerned about is we, as a fire department, provide a very, fortunately, you know, with you guys, provide a very high level of care. We have the advanced life support that we provide, and we don't want to risk that. I know that you all are very proud of it. We're very proud of you for providing that. And so we don't want to lose that, and we don't want to create an opportunity where they, at some point, not by any actions of y'all as a whole or us, you know, all of a sudden, for some odd reason, you know, a bunch of people decide, I don't want to ride the ambulance anymore, I don't want to be a paramedic, and they drop. They can still be a part of the fire department, and then we're kind of stuck with how are we going to maintain that level of care that we had been providing this long. So that's just one of the concerns that we're, you know, that we have in our mind. It's to, you know, we want to make sure that we help you maintain that level, and that we can continue with that and even grow upon that, maintain our high Rossi scores and all of that. That we're very proud of that, and our community appreciates that. So that's one of the concerns that we have when we're looking at this. And I, you know.
And Roxy, I mean, two things real quickly about that. Number one is that, you know, we agree that you have legitimate concerns, and that was why from the get-go I suggested that we form the subcommittee to try and find a win-win situation. But, you know, if you'll recall, like last session, you said, well, we would like to see a proposal from you.
Right.
And so I told you, well, I'm going to get you a proposal that addresses our needs and concerns as a starting point. And so
Right.
that's what I've done here. And you
Absolutely.
should. But the other thing is that if you really want to maintain quality, then you have to address the burnout problem too. Because if you've got a firefighter that's been doing 8 straight years of ambulance service, and they're burned out, they're not providing probably the quality of care that somebody that's fresher could and would provide.
Do you have any data available to y'all or to us that we would be able to evaluate that burnout issue?
Tons of it. Absolutely.
That you're relying
Let me
on?
talk to my team and see what we do have, but I would ask y'all for data too. I mean, because as I've told you, you know, I do not believe that your problem is that people are opting off of the ambulance, that they're voluntarily demoting. And I would ask you for statistics over the last 5 years. How many people have voluntarily demoted? And I don't think we're probably going to come up with 10. And you've got a fire department of 300 and something. So 400 something. So, you know, that's, I mean, that's not where the problem is. I mean, preserving their right to opt off is not going to lose you a bunch of people. What's losing you a bunch of people is that the call volume's growing, the number of ambulances in service is growing by 2, and the staffing level is not.
Yeah.
I mean, the
And
staffing
on
level
top
is
of
going
that-
down.
And on top of that, people have the opportunity to opt out of riding the ambulance, which is, you know, and that adds to that as well, if you keep going on.
Sure,
what the
but
concerns are.
if you say, well, historically people haven't opted off, but now all of a sudden we've got a handful of people that have, the $1 million question is why? Why are they doing that now? And it may be because whereas they used to be on the ambulance half the time, now they're on the ambulance 75% of the time or 100% of the time, and it's really hard. I mean, don't get me wrong. I stand second to none in my admiration for firefighters and the hardness of the job. But anybody who's been in an intense medical situation knows that that's some of the, you know, you're making life and death decisions, boom, boom, boom. And when you're making 7, 8, 10 calls a day in some of these high volume stations, you're just out and you don't even get an opportunity to sleep. He's saying
Yeah,
sometimes 20.
7 or 8 is.
You know, 24 hours without sleep, and you're, you know, so it takes a toll.
Yeah,
So,
and I understand, that's why I'm asking, you know,
Yeah.
I'm hearing about this burnout problem, but is there data from this department that will help us understand
let me
where
see
you're
what the
coming from
team
on that?
has.
Yeah.
And, but again, I don't want you to think for a minute that we don't recognize that the city has a problem and that we're shying away from our obligation to help you meet the problem. We want to do that. And I think the best way is to try and look for a win-win solution. Simply taking away rights that people have now that are important to them makes our job of selling this contract to our members very hard. And number two, it's not really, I don't think, an adequate way to address the problem. Because if you have people leaving the department, you know, to get away from it, then you're hurting yourself too.
Okay. Roxy, on the EMS side of the department, historically, we haven't had an issue with people dropping their certification. Historically, what we did have was people able to voluntarily demote from firefighter 2 to firefighter 1 because there was always somebody behind them to take their place. What has happened recently is that guys have no recourse to voluntarily demote off the ambulance, so their natural recourse is to drop their certification. That gets you off the box.
But
We don't like that, just as you shouldn't like
Neither
that.
do they.
And they don't like it just from their own perspective of they lose certification pay and they lose a rank pay. So you're talking about people that are taking, I mean, you don't get to voluntarily demote without a tremendous financial cost to yourself and your family. And if you have more people that are doing that now, you gotta ask yourself, why would they be willing to do that? I mean, it not only affects them and how much money they earn now, but it potentially affects how much money they're gonna earn in retirement. Because you know their retirement, like your retirement, is based on high 3, et cetera. So, I mean, there's a real financial cost to firefighters of doing this. So it is not, I know it's not their preferred remedy.
Can I add something?
Sure.
To get your paramedic certification or licensure now is extremely tough. It's very demanding. It takes months, it takes a year and a half sometimes. It's costly. If you have a few guys recently that have been willing just to throw it away, it's got to tell you there's a bigger reason why they're willing to give it all up. All of us here, with the exception of John, are paramedics. We're not 5-year paramedics. We're 10, 15, 20, and almost 30-year paramedics. There's a reason you don't give it up. The few that have let it go here recently had no choice. They were getting beat down so hard that it's like, I don't care anymore. It's like giving up your lawyer's license. I don't care anymore. I got to take a break.
It was a defense mechanism.
It's a defense mechanism. And that goes back to echo the demand on the paramedics today, as you said, is extremely demanding. And when you have nobody to backfill as you've done your time and you're ready to move over to the truck and do your paramedic duties there, which extends your paramedic career and makes you useful for more than 8 years, 10 years, makes you useful for 20 and 30 years, you have no choice. If they can't get out of it, it's physically and emotionally demanding.
You know, one thing our two groups could do is to do some sort of a study or look-see at how other cities are dealing with this problem. Y'all have a kind of unique way of addressing the problem. I mean, most of the cities that I'm aware of have rotations in and out of, you know, but you know when you go in that after a certain amount of time I'm going to rotate out. And so you don't have that burnout. You go, okay, I'm going to do this for 2 years or 3 years or whatever it is, and then I'm going to get a chance to rotate out for 2 years or 3 years. And so, you know.
And then do they go back?
And sometimes they do go back, yeah. It, you know, depends on the department and the need. But I would say that there's not one solution to the problem, but there probably is a best solution to the problem. And I think we both have interests, you know, that would be served by trying to hunt for a workable solution. But simply imposing a solution is going to be, you know, probably not the preferable method.
Craig? Man?
Okay, but this is the last time.
And you know, this is a multifaceted problem issue. The other part of it is the retention issue, because, you know, out of the 26, 27 guys that we hired last time, I think we've got about 13 left. So we do have a retention issue. And you gotta remember that these guys, you're paying them for a year and they produce nuggets, nothing. And they're walking right out the door with the city's money, only now they're well-trained and going to other areas. So I'm sure that you've looked at these and you know that we have a bit of a retention issue, so that also falls into the mix. How can we keep these people? Why are they leaving Corpus and going to other municipalities with our training, our money? So that's something to consider.
Any more questions about Article 33? Or?
Yeah, let me just look through. I know we got a lot of my questions covered in the last conversation. On the 5 years continuous service and 8 years continuous service, does that mean all at once, that there's no gaps in that service?
That's my understanding.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
I mean, if, you know.
That can make a big difference, you know, that's why I was asking.
Yeah, sure. I mean, but once they get into the ambulance rotation, they're pretty much staying in the ambulance rotation until they're removed, and that's usually years.
Okay. I had a follow-up on when I asked whether the chief retains the discretion to grant a request for voluntary demotion. My understanding is that you pulled that language and you intended to grandfather what's already happening in the old contract?
Yeah.
Am I right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Recently, there was an arbitration award that was issued on that very issue with regard to a request for voluntary demotion. And I don't know if you have we've had the opportunity to review that, and I'd be happy to send it to you if you need. But as I recall, I haven't read it in months. But
No.
as I recalled, I believe that the arbitrator established that the chief did have discretion to.
The arbitrator
grant that.
interpreted the contract to mean that the chief had discretion. We think that the arbitrator reached the wrong decision. We are trying to clarify that point.
Okay, that's why I
here.
just wanted
Okay.
to clarify that.
Arbitration decisions, unlike Court of Appeals decisions, aren't necessarily binding, although most arbitrators will follow prior arbitrators' work. That's true, but not always. So,
There's always that one, right?
yep,
Okay.
hope dies last.
Can you be a firefighter without an EMT certification?
Sure. I mean, you mean just in the state of Texas?
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
If you
I
were a
don't think so.
firefighter
It's
before.
hard to.
There were some years, the grandfather,
But
There's a
right,
year.
There's a grandfather, but I think now
I think that's where that.
you have to have
Yeah.
an EMT certification to be a sworn firefighter.
Minimum. And I think it's 2006.
5 years.
Well, that's not about 10 years behind, so
And
I
that,
feel good about that.
I was just asking because on, let's see, on B section 3, which one is this? On that tier of June 1st, 1985 through December 31st, 2005, on 3, it says that thereafter they may not be required to maintain paramedic or EMT certification. That's why it came up.
I think they may have been grandfathered under the state requirements.
Okay. If grandfathered, that's what you don't.
Yeah, I mean,
Okay.
obviously, if the state requires it to maintain structural fire certification, then you're gonna have to have it.
Okay.
I mean, that's not something either you or we can do anything about.
On, let me see which one this is. On section 2C, I had some some questions because it may be in conflict with some of the certification requirements on the tiers that are identified above in the top of your proposal and with new hires. Because the new hires, meaning the last tier, the most recently hired, if they're not certified within 12 months, I think it states that they're terminated under your proposal. And so I was just trying to get clarity on this temporary and permanent demotion.
Well, the requirements differ for the various, tiers of firefighters. So there are some firefighters who are required to maintain certification for X number of years, and if they lose it and they don't recertify within 12 months, they're fired. But if you have a firefighter 2 EMS who could, demote to firefighter 1 without, and they're not subject to that, then this 12 months would apply to them.
Okay.
So this is more or less with the grandfathered people.
Okay.
And I do want to point out that the current contract says 90 days to recertify, but 90 days is not enough time because if you have to go through the recertification class, it's going to take longer than that. So that's why we advanced it to 12 months. And the other thing is that this is one of those areas where I think, we do need to look. Because this is the contract that's been written over a period of time, and historically things have changed. You used to have to take a test to maintain certification. That has more recently changed, and now it's a matter of keeping up continuing ed. So I think the people that lose certification are going to be few and far in between. It would be a situation like somebody gets injured.
Okay.
And is out for an extended period of time and can't do their CE or something like that.
Or a system crash and you lose all your documentation.
Where's my data?
Yeah.
On section 2D, and this, I don't know if this is covered by this. You want to say something before
I just wanted to say that
Okay.
I did make one other change, and it actually was in y'all's favor. Used to, when you lost certification, you kept certification pay for 90 days. We changed that to if you lose certification, you lose certification pay immediately.
Okay.
And we think that is a warranted and fair change.
On section 2D, fire department assistance, this allows a firefighter who needs to meet or maintain a certification requires to go on a 40-hour work week. Is there a vacancy created with this? And who covers his duties when he does that?
This
Or
is
her, his
this
or
is a
her?
provision that's in the contract right now. And what I would say is that whether or not you need to fill in behind that firefighter, you probably do. But this is where I see this situation coming up more is with your new people that are certifying for the first time.
Okay.
Recertification is just a matter of maintaining continuing ed, and it's not a matter of testing anymore. So I really think this is only going to apply with your new people, and you've trained them for 10 months, you've got them their fire certification, and now they've failed their initial EMT. You don't want to lose that, the time and money you put into that person. You want them to, they have, I think, 2 chances to recertify. So you're putting them
Within
on.
that 18-month period?
Yeah,
I think
yeah. Well,
Well,
I'm just talking about
in
under state
general.
requirements.
Oh, okay.
State requirements, you get 3 bites at the apple, and if you flunk 3 times, you gotta go through the whole course all over again before you can sit for the test. So this is a situation where, okay, they needed a 70, they got a 68. We're gonna put them through a crash course and get them to take that test again real quick and hopefully pass it, and then they're good to go.
Okay.
So it's really, I really see this as benefiting both the firefighter and the department. You don't want to lose the value of that. Like I said, and I think everybody will agree with me, those tests, that test is getting harder and harder. It's not easy.
There's no there's no true vacancy created.
No, they
If that's
continue
your
to
question.
Right, yeah.
occupy, they continue to occupy the position unless and until they're fired. But whether or not you need to fill in behind them on the truck, you probably
Right.
would.
Okay.
I mean, you could choose not to, I guess, but probably not a good thing.
Everything else, let's see, where was it? Section 3,
You know,
Section 4, they kind of all
I
look the
pretty
same.
much,
Yeah.
it is pretty much the same.
Section.
I am cognizant of the fact that y'all made a proposal to change that to, I think, an assistant chief, something or other. And rather than try and address that with this first proposal, because I had promised to get you something by today,
Sure.
I just maintain the status quo, but we're not rejecting that out of hand at all. We want to hear your rationale and reasoning and all that good stuff. so.
Okay. And on Section 5, my question was, does the chief retain discretion for this request? And I'm guessing that your answer is no, it's an automatic kind of deal pursuant to the rest of your proposal.
Yeah, I mean, and that language is out of the current agreement.
Okay.
So, the only thing that's
And-
really new is Section 6.
You're breaking my heart, Craig. I thought you said no staffing.
We brought that up to him.
And, well, sometimes I do as I'm told. What I would say about this is that you have a real problem here. I threw it in here. I'm certainly willing to take it out. But I'm really hoping that we're going to get a group together and try and come up with a win-win situation. What's happening is that in the stations where the 2 new ambulances have appeared and you haven't increased the staffing, you've got a lot of firefighter 1s that are routinely being moved up to firefighter 2 EMS and being assigned to the ambulance. So much so that I personally think that existing case law indicates that that's an illegal solution to your problem. There's case law on the books that says you can't de facto create a position and then ignore it without filling it. I mean, firefighter 2 is a promotional position, and so promotional positions have to be filled within 90 or 60 days, as the case may be. So but the problem is that then when you're pulling the firefighter 1 off the fire truck, you're not filling in behind that firefighter 1. So the trucks are running with fewer people. We do feel like that is a grave safety concern. But we know that staffing is something that y'all are very jealously guarding your prerogatives on. And at the same time, we're asking you to brainstorm with us and come up with a solution that allows you to meet those needs, but also, address our legitimate concerns too. Again, I'm going to say this so often, you're going to think I'll agree to stop beating the horse if you'll agree it's dead. I really think that you have very legitimate interests and concerns, but I think that we do too. And I think we really need to work together to find a solution. Collective bargaining at its best is a win-win, and that's what I hope this can be.
Well, I'll thank you for providing me with the initial proposal on this EMS, so I can take it back and we will talk about it on our side, and we'll discuss it further.
Can we take about a sharp 5-minute break?
We
Let me
sure
go
can.
grab my phone, which is charging, and then if y'all don't have any more questions about our proposals, I'll ask you some about
Sure.
yours. Okay.
Sounds good.
Okay, looking at the preamble first, this apparently is just language out of the existing agreement. It looks to be word for word the preamble of the current agreement. I'm gonna make you a counter proposal. It'll modify this slightly. are a couple of things. We're probably gonna wanna be called the association rather than the union. We are a labor union, we don't shy from that at all. But there is the Corpus Christi Firefighters, Professional Firefighters Association, International Association of Firefighters. I'm just more used to the association terminology, but I'll have you a counter on that next time. Non-discrimination, I don't think we need to talk about, because that's already the source of the TA, our sole TA, but we're gonna change that shortly, I'm sure. Just generally about your proposals, it would help me to the extent if you can formulate them as counters to my proposals. You know, I mean, your counter may be, you know, with regards to sections of a particular article that I gave you that we don't want that in the contract or whatever, I don't care, but just so that we're kind of operating off of the same page. I'm going to try and do that as best I can with regards to your proposals too. Management rights troubled me a lot because I think there may be a disconnect. I mean, you know, management rights is really a retention of existing rights that management has that haven't been altered by the agreement. But there was some very important language in my proposal, and I don't think that you meant to change it from yours. I mean, as I read this, if we just agreed to this language as is, we would be essentially rescinding the Civil Service Act. And I'm sure that wasn't your intention.
No, that's not the intention.
You know, so I'm going to put that language back in, but you see, you say except as modified by this agreement, you retain in all management rights. This means the city has and will continue to retain regardless rights to operate in each and every respect. You know, you haven't taken into account in that language that the Civil Service Act, other statutes, Chapter 142 of the Local Government Code, Chapter 614 of the Government Code, all sorts of provisions, currently the Texas Constitution, U.S. Constitution, all of those obviously restrict your rights. For example, you don't have, one of the things you've got here in your list of things is, you know, the right to hire. Well, of course, that's very much circumscribed by the Civil Service Act. The right to create or abolish positions. Obviously, under the Civil Service Act, only your city council has that right.
Well,
Both to create positions and establish the number or to set the ranks and establish the number of positions in each rank. And so, you know, the Civil Service Act, if I look at these 32 things that you laundry listed here, the Civil Service Act circumscribes almost every one of them.
right.
For example, 31, to contract out or subcontract out work. That is almost non-existent to you. It's already taken away by the Civil Service Act. You can't subcontract out work that is the work of civil service firefighters. And so, and to use non-sworn personnel in any manner, the same kind of thing. And what concerned me was the rights reserved to the sole discretion of the city shall include. But that's, you know, that makes it sound like that because you have the right to modify civil service through collective bargaining, you know, it sounds like that's what you're trying to do in your management rights
No,
provision.
and let me explain, that's not the intention. The general gist of the first paragraph was to say that we retain all the rights that we have, and that would include whatever is afforded to us by law. Of course, the city's limited to civil service and the statutes and the U.S. Constitution. I mean, that we have to follow that, and there was no intention to override or get rid of that whatsoever.
Right.
And in these laundry lists of things, of course, we have rights to do these things with limitations provided by the law. And so there's no intention in that. What the intention of this management rights clause was basically to enumerate the management rights that we already have, okay? And that's basically what it is, just to make it clear, because there has been, you know, I think there has been concern that it's not clear what our management rights are. You know, we don't intend, just because something's not in the contract, we don't intend to waive them if it's not specifically addressed with regard, you know, with regard to the things that we negotiate and that we're permitted to agree and negotiate upon. So in no way, for clarification, that general statement was included to our to the rights that we have, which would be rights that we have afforded by the law, limited by the law, told, where we're
Right.
told exactly what to do by the law. That's the intention.
Okay, and
Okay.
I appreciate that explanation because that's very helpful. Because the thing is that management rights clause is not like, what I've been telling my team, and maybe you'll confirm that y'all understand it the same way, management rights provision is not an affirmative grant of rights to the city. It's the city saying, hey, if we have the right already,
We're
and we haven't
maintaining it.
given it up in this contract, we still got that right.
That's absolutely correct.
So it's not, and so you don't understand this as an affirmative grant of rights too, it's a preservation of rights already possessed.
It's an enumeration of rights that we already have today and that we have had. And it's just that laundry list is to help specify and give examples as to what we're afforded, what rights we're afforded.
Okay.
Whether by the charter, by law,
Right.
we can't,
Right.
we don't have any rights without the law,
Absolutely.
And
I
so
mean-
it's all encompassing, and that's the general intent of it. And if we need to make that clearer, we can definitely work
And
on that.
I'll give you a counter that hopefully will make it a little bit clearer. The other thing is that, and I see this a lot, is because it is a retention of rights, y'all have established such a long list, and many of these things seem to be overlapping. Just as one example, if I look at item 2 and item 5, item 2 is to determine the organization and operations of the fire department. Item 5 is to exercise control and discretion over the organization and efficiency of operations of the fire department. To me, those don't seem to be any different. Are they different?
I think I have to look at that a little bit closely, and I'll be able to let you know, but I think out of abundance of caution, with the history that we've had on grievances, aimed specifically at a lot of the management decisions that have been made in the last several years, I think it was important to address and itemize things so that it's clear, and I think that was the purpose. If we're under an understanding, we can make it clear within that, and we can consolidate some of those laundry lists, that's fine. But I need
Yeah.
to make sure that it covers
Covers the waterfront.
right, what we retain.
To me, the list is just like a list of examples.
That's right.
This is not an inclusive list. These are the kinds of things that we have.
That's
And
right.
if you want to file a grievance, you need to point to a specific provision of the contract that we violated.
Absolutely.
Or if you think we're violating the statute, you need to file a lawsuit. So,
That's right.
okay. I agree, but have we filed grievances in the past without saying you violated this or that provision of the contract?
Well, and that's when we start talking about the prevailing rights provision. And that creates a very, very gray area with regard to what you understand, what the union understands prevailing rights to be, and what management rights to be, and what the city understands management rights and prevailing rights to be. And that's really the core of why it needs to be so specific, and why it's written in that way, and why we maintain that management decisions, which are shown by example, and you're right, it's not it's not all
It's not an
that's not
exclusive
a
list.
limited list. It includes other things that we can't account for at this point. There's a lot of things that may come up, and we can't enumerate it because it wasn't in existence, or that need didn't come up at the time. But the exercise of our management rights, and the frequency of our exercise of management rights should not be subject to challenge, other than anything that is modified within the contract, scheduling, hours of work, anything that we agree to within the provisions of the collective bargaining agreement.
Well, and I can't do it today, but I am going to go over this list pretty finely. Just to use another example, item 32, to use non-sworn personnel in any manner. Well, of course, the contract may or may not limit your ability to use non-sworn.
Right, but the
I think
law
it does, but the law clearly
Right.
does.
And we understand that.
Well, I know that you say that, and I'm kind of prefacing what's going to be my counter, but if you look at the very next sentence after 32, it says these inherent managerial functions, whether listed above or not, which the city is not expressly modified or restricted by a specific provision of this agreement, are not in any way directly or indirectly waived or subject to challenge. That means if I say you're violating the statute, you can say, well, no, look, they gave up the right to challenge.
And that's
us.
not our intention.
I didn't
Okay,
think so.
right.
I
That's
didn't
not our
think so.
intention, because
Okay.
we know that we're bound, we
By the
can't,
Civil Service Act.
we can't use non-sworn employees or contract employees to fill positions that are required to be filled by sworn firefighters. We know that.
Okay.
So that is absolutely not the
Okay.
intention.
Well, I think I can give you a counter that hopefully will meet your legitimate concerns, but of course, I'm hearing you, and you don't have to telegraph anything you don't want to, but I'm assuming that from what you're saying, that y'all don't want maintenance of standards to be part of the agreement.
At this point, the maintenance of standards that you have presented, and we still haven't fully evaluated it, we wanted to make sure that we solidify what management rights we retain, and this is a retain, not something that you're granting us, but what we retain. The prevailing rights has been a major issue, in this contract, and it has provided a major obstacle to the exercise of management rights. And so there's a disconnect between the union and the city with regard to what prevailing rights or maintenance of standards really means. And that's the issue, and that's what we're evaluating. But we'll have to March 5th, and but at this point.
No, I understand. Let me just say this about maintenance of standards, because I know it's going to be an issue. And it's been an issue in a lot of cities where I've negotiated, for police and fire. And, there is, and what you're articulating is a concern that I often hear. Management feels like they have management rights. But the bargaining law is that normally even interim, changes in between agreements, interim changes in mandatory conditions of employment are subject to a negotiation requirement. And that's why management
What about
says,
impacts, related to impacts, right?
not just impacts, but actual changes themselves. That's why management often puts a so-called zipper clause into a contract. Well, if you didn't get it, blah, blah. And so by the same token, it's very hard for a union to foresee all of the things that may be necessary for them to protect. So the kind of compromise has been zipper clause on the one hand, but maintenance of standards on the other. And what form that maintenance of standards takes and how it can be used, that's something that we can negotiate. But just to take it out entirely and at the same time give me a 32-item list of management rights that we say aren't affected, that's really hard, because that means that you're taking a contract that maybe is 60 pages, and now we need to make it 160 pages to protect all of the things that are important. And we don't want to do that.
Right, but we
don't want to hamstring you either.
Right, but you have forwarded proposals that address the very concerns that you're talking about, that would cover what the concerns that you raised right now that you're attributing to a maintenance of standards clause. And that would be, number one, the city is well aware, and the law establishes, and I think we're all on the same page, that the city cannot make unilateral changes on mandatory subjects. Those must be bargained, and we understand that. And so the city's not in a position, and will never take the position that they're going to do that, and there may be some issue to what is a mandatory subject, but we have through the amendments clause that you have proposed, we have the opportunity to agree to open up something that we all agree is a mandatory subject. Also, we have the Labor Management Committee that I think we both submitted proposals on. That is also a way to open up communication and raise these issues and talk about them. And then if ultimately we disagree about what is a mandatory subject and you believe that we're doing something unilaterally that we shouldn't, it doesn't take away your opportunity to file a lawsuit in court. So you do have opportunities and you do have remedies with regard to the rights that you feel that you have, And that's why we're trying to establish what our rights are, the rights that we attain within the management rights. I just think it's just, with the prevailing rights, it just gets really, really gray.
It sure, it does, but the beauty of prevailing rights, management rights dispute is that you've got this grievance arbitration mechanism that, if it operates correctly, deals with the problem quickly and finally. Our guys believed that they had the right to voluntarily demote whether the fire chief wanted them to or not. Y'all believe differently. We had a grievance, and at least for the duration of this contract, we don't have that right. And so, litigation these days is a crapshoot, number one. So is arbitration.
So is arbitration.
Sure, but even more so, it's a crapshoot, and it just goes on forever.
Right.
Litigation, you go all the way to the Supreme Court, you're looking at a 3 to 4 year process.
Right, but it's limited to issues that really need to be litigated. When you're using a prevailing rights clause on grievances, we have historically, I think in the last, it's probably 2011, we've had 30 grievances that we have been dealing with, all based, most, I'm not going to say all because I can't remember, I'm speaking off the top of my head, but the majority of them were based on a prevailing rights clause. And those are, there's 30 of them. They're private arbitrations. We have to defend them. We have no choice as a city, and it's very expensive for both the union and the city. And it also, when those things are at issue, it really affects the city's ability to efficiently and properly manage its operations when that particular issue is the subject of agreements and we're prevented from doing something, to acting on something that we really need to act on right away.
Well, number one, there are other ways to deal with that problem than simply remove maintenance of standards. I can't think of any change that you can't make that the filing of a grievance would halt. In other words, we want to change the way we do callback procedures. And we say, well, you can't do that, maintenance of standards. And you say, well, we're going to do it. And you say, well, we're going to file a grievance. Well, our filing of a grievance doesn't stop you from acting on that. And then if you feel like there's too many grievances and that some of the grievances are BS, fancy legal term.
Latin.
Yeah. French.
Yeah, French.
Then there are ways to deal with that in the grievance procedure to make sure that, and there are ways to modify maintenance of standards to make sure that it is used, only for meaningful disputes. I have to, and I will, review with my team what are these 30 grievances and what subjects they've covered and see what's going on there. But let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. Let's look at the problem that we have and find a way to solve it without hamstringing either side. I mean, what I'm hearing you say is you feel like we're using maintenance standards to hamstring you from acting. I don't think that we have that ability, because a grievance doesn't stop you from doing anything unless the arbitrator says we win and you have to undo it.
Right.
But
it does, if we do act and it's still going on, it does create continuing liability issues if we are found to be
if it's a pay issue?
It does, whether it's a pay issue or like a leave issue, a sick leave issue, or some sort of I can't think off the top of my head, but
yeah,
there could be
details.
there could be continuing liability issues, is what I'm saying, and that would prevent us as a city. We're bound. We don't deal with our money; it's taxpayer money, and we're bound to a lot of accountability standards and legal standards, etc. So we would, it would create a big issue for us on continuing liability.
Well, I hear that. Let me talk to my team about what these 30 grievances have been about and try and figure out, how many create. Because at base, we're citizens too. We're taxpayers too. We care about those issues too. These guys don't want their taxes going up any more than y'all do. And, one of the problems I have with firefighters all the time is that they're wanting to address the public's interest. And I say, hey, your job is to look out after your fellow employees and let the city worry about the public. But that's the reason they got in this business in the first place, is because they care about the public and providing the service. So, you're not necessarily talking to just a wall when you say there's a fiscal concern. I mean, we will look at that seriously.
Okay.
But I do think that there's a way to solve this problem. And I have, working with management teams before, solved the problem when there's been this kind of problem in the past. And I don't think it's like a light switch that the light's either on or off. I think that, we need a dimmer switch. So. Okay. Working conditions. Some of this, it looks to me is like a response to the proposals that we have made, and I haven't had a chance to go through that exactly. But with working conditions and compensation both, my question to you is, you're not proposing with regards to working conditions that this is all the working conditions you mean for the contract to address?
Absolutely not, and I thought I had made that clear at the beginning, because as you know, we're working on other parts. I said this is not, we're gonna be adding to this, so by me giving it to you in this form does not mean that these are the only working conditions we're gonna consider. We have other proposals that we're preparing and that will come under the working conditions subject, the compensation subject, and the collective bargaining negotiation impasse procedure subject. And so if that's what you were kind of asking at the beginning, I may have misunderstood and I apologize, but this is not exclusive. This doesn't mean this is the only thing that we're gonna be proposing or consider, et cetera. So it's a work in progress.
Looking at page 9, we took that out of our proposal. This is the language about the duty to bargain in good faith and not making efforts to bypass. We got so crossways on this very language that I think, that this is an issue. Y'all literally are the only city that I've seen, and I'm not saying there aren't others, and I just may not be aware of them, where something like this is in the contract as opposed to the ground rules that are negotiated at the outset of negotiations. And I'm wondering if this isn't an issue that's better left to negotiation of ground rules, and I'm wondering why y'all want this in the contract so bad.
Well, I think it just reiterates for both parties the duties that we're under legally and morally on the duty to bargain in good faith under Chapter 174. And it enumerates, obviously, there was a need for this particular provision in the contract. It was, I can't remember when it was put in there, but it was sometime in the 70s. It wasn't the first contract, but I think it was in the 70s or before the 70s were out that it showed up in there. And I don't think this is a bad provision because it enforces, the duties and the obligations and the conduct and professionalism that both parties should be negotiating under.
I had not thought before this past year that it was a bad provision to have in the contract either. But the way it was, but that was because we had such differing interpretations of the language. You probably recall when I deposed the city manager, I asked him and he agreed with me that it had not been interpreted in the past as you were interpreting it in this contract cycle. That in fact, our bargaining team had, our chapter president at least, had often gone and talked to city council members about ongoing negotiations. And I think the way your city manager put it was that was standard operating practice in Corpus. And so that practice, I think, reflects the intent of the parties all along. And the duty to bargain in good faith, legally and morally too, I don't think means that you should not avail yourself of the tools that give you political ability to obtain your objectives. I mean, I could go through a laundry list of things that management does to communicate to union members about these things. But be that as it may, again, it's not a light switch on or off. There's a dimmer switch that's available to us. One of the things that I think that will help us both is making sure you're not grabbing my water. One of the things that I think will help us, and it's already one of the things that I've thought about, is to try, and whatever the term of this contract is, to make sure that it's happening in a non-election year, so that we don't have this kind of problems that we had where you had an election going on at the same time we were,
Right.
trying to. And also, there's a real First Amendment issue here. The way y'all were interpreting this thing, our members we can't control our members. We like to think we can, but it's like herding cats. They're gonna go down to the council, they're gonna do this, they're gonna do that. And, we had an issue that arose last year where somebody who was not a member of the union went to the council and y'all said, hey, yeah, you can address the council. But then it's like, well, why are union members, second-class citizens? So I think that the better way, and I'm hopeful that I can convince y'all, that the better way to make this happen, to make this less of an issue for us, is to develop a good impasse procedure. If we both know that there's a terminal point and that we're gonna have an agreement, and it may not be the one we want, but it's the one where we'll be allowed to make our points, then the kind of need, to try, and utilize political leverage, I think goes way down,
Well,
So, but I'm not asking you to read anything today, I'm
Right,
just
no.
giving you my initial thoughts. The Labor Management Committee is, I think, not controversial, and that's really, my, questions about your proposals themselves. Most of my questions obviously were about management rights and its relationship to maintenance of standards. But I would like to talk for just we gotta go. I would like to talk for 60 seconds about what we're gonna do next week.
Okay.
What I'm gonna try and do is, to the extent that I can, make some proposals that look at the counter proposals that you've given me
Okay.
and try to address them. And again, I would ask you to do sort of the same thing. To the extent that you can work off of my proposals, it will help me move the process along. I'm not trying to control you in any way. You can say, okay, Craig, here's a proposal you made and it's got 10 sections. Well, we'll reduce that to 4 real quick.
Okay.
That's fine.
One of the things I want to make sure we don't lose is our ability to put down what our initial proposals are, kind of our baseline. But in terms of logistics, et cetera, I'll figure out a way to connect them or bridge them
Connect
to
the dots.
Right, connect the dots to the counter proposals. So with 20 seconds, I just want to say I think we're on the right track. In, like, for instance, on the collective bargaining negotiations duty for good faith and labor management committee, I know that we don't, this has been, especially the duty to bargain in good faith, has been a point of contention for a while, but let's use this as a platform to establish something good between the city and the union, something that establishes what, how we really would like for these negotiations to go and to be able to end in a labor contract, right? So I just wanted to kind of start working from there.
I agree with you. I think that we're working real hard from our side to try and come up with you said you wanted to negotiate from the ground up. We're really trying to meet you on that. We tried to, make the language a lot more comprehensible. We're not trying to drop whole swaths of the contract that have grown up over the years, but we are trying to make it something that people can easily comprehend and use. So.
Okay. All
Okay.
right.
Very good, guys. We'll see y'all next week.
Thank you.
Thank
See you
you.
next week.
We need Wi-Fi.